Hey everybody, welcome to the David Pakman Show. I'm producer Pat Ford filling in for David again today. David is heading back home from California today, so it's me hosting instead. He did a bunch of media appearances over the last week or so out in California. A bunch of those interviews have published already, but there are a bunch more coming out. So if you're looking for more David content, it's out there. However, he was not available today to host the show, but we have quite the show for you, a real shakeup in the Democratic primary. We have a look at the picture in the Senate. Democratic odds for taking the Senate in 2026 look pretty good. And we're going to start things off today by talking about JD Vance because he appeared on Will Cain's Fox News show. And the interview seemed sort of like an audition for 2028. I think out of all the potential contenders for the 2028 election on both sides, Republican and Democrat, JD Vance clearly seems like the person who's most likely to announce a candidacy because he's just so clearly well set up for it, being Trump's vice president right now. JD Vance got this little test run first in the form of being asked about the Iran war, which by all accounts he was actually against. To his credit, before the Iran war started, he was the voice in the room saying, wait, isn't this against everything we ran on? Aren't we supposed to be the anti-war crowd now? Didn't we say that we're not going to do more forever wars in the Middle East? So here he is being asked about it. And of course, he can't say that the Iran war is a disaster because he still has to represent his boss. He still has to represent Trump. So the test for JD Vance, and we'll see him do this with a bunch of different things, is he has to try to thread the needle between staking his own position so he can look like his own man and have a chance in 2028, while at the same time still appearing loyal to Donald Trump and acting like the things that Trump is doing right now is going to overall help the situation. So here's the first clip that we're going to look at. Here is JD Vance being asked about the seesaw that has been the Iran war, with Trump one day saying that the war is over and the troops are coming home and Iran lost, and then the next day saying that we have to go back to war. We have to hit them harder than ever before because they fell through on some agreement or something like that. Here is Will Cain asking about that seesaw effect.
Let's talk for a minute about Iran. There is frustration, Mr. Vice President, I think, out there on the seesaw nature of what's going on in Iran. We're close to a deal, then we're going to bomb the hell out of them. The strait is open, then the strait is closed. And I'm sure that frustration is shared inside the White House. So I know it's hard to project, but let me ask you, how does this end? What does this look like when and if it's over with Iran?
Well, the thing I can say with confidence is I think this ends with the United States in a stronger position, with Iran not having a nuclear weapon, and with the Strait of Hormuz returned to a place where oil and gas prices are stable for the American people.
All right, so I got to stop real quick. JD Vance here says that the objectives now for the U.S. are apparently that the U.S. leaves Iran in a stronger position than where it was before, that we have destroyed their nuclear capabilities, and that the Strait of Hormuz is open. Well, I hate to break it to you, but that sounds a lot like the position that we were in before this war started and Trump decided to make all these policy changes with Iran. So the U.S. being in a stronger position, it's going to be really difficult to imagine the U.S. ending up in a stronger position once all this is said and done, especially because we've already depleted our missile stockpile and we've already spent billions and billions and billions of dollars in this war, and we don't know how long it's going to go on for. When it comes to the Iranian nuclear weapons program, well, we had that under control, by all accounts, under the Obama deal that Trump got us out of. And even if you don't believe that, well, then I guess you believe Trump, who said that after Operation Midnight Hammer, we had destroyed Iran's nuclear capabilities. So that one, too, doesn't make sense. And then when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz being opened, of course, that was something that we also had before. We had the stable gas prices that JD Vance wanted. So all these things that we're laying out as successes now really were just things that we had before Trump got involved. And remember, they said that they were going to have regime change. There was talk about the U.S. Installing a puppet government over there in Iran. They certainly weren't going to have a nuclear weapons program. And now Trump has said that, well, maybe they can have some nuclear capabilities. Clearly, we're in a much weaker position than we were when we started all of this. Let's continue the clip.
I think the issue here, Will, is that the Iranians sometimes make commitments that they don't honor. They make a deal, they don't honor the deal. And
that actually sounds a lot more to me like Donald Trump, who Didn't honor the Iran nuclear deal under Barack Obama, decided to get out of it, is constantly saying we need a ceasefire and then breaking it, going back into the conflict once he gets flack from the Republican Party, who is upset with him over ending the conflict. I mean, it's actually Donald Trump who can't stick to his word.
Shane, your point about the seesaw nature of this, but I think what that reflects is that we have a lot of tools at our disposal to compel action. And sometimes we're focused on the energy piece of it because we want Americans to be able to afford the price of oil and gas. Sometimes we're obviously focused on the military nature of it. Sometimes we're focused on the nuclear program. So I think what is really happening is that you're seeing a president of the United States at the height of his authority with a lot of tools.
Yeah, I actually agree with him there. Donald Trump certainly does have some tools. He has Stephen Miller, he has Pete Hegseth, and he has the tool that is JD Vance, among so many other people in the White House. Next up, we move from talking about the war to talking about economic policy, and it's the same thing. JD Vance has to walk this tightrope because on the one side, he has to hear out people's frustrations, especially if he's going to run for president in 2028, which he likely will. He has to offer them this like alternate path that's different. He has to offer change in some form. But at the same time, he can't anger Trump. He has to make it seem like what Trump is doing is different and awesome and that there's hope in this second Trump administration. So it's a difficult thing to do. Let's see how he does.
This wonderful country that we all live in. And my warning to my fellow Republicans, Will, would be if we don't get this right, don't blame young people for being sympathetic to socialism. We've got to blame ourselves. And I think what is so unique and refreshing about Donald Trump's economic policies is that it's not the same old economic, ideas that you would have heard 30, 40 years ago. He's talking about rebuilding our industrial base, rebuilding the heartland, making our streets safer, making it possible for young people to afford to buy a home. This is how you stop socialism. You don't stop socialism by throwing slogans at people about the free market. As much as I love the free market, you stop socialism by making people's lives better. And that's what we're trying to do every single day.
Notice how Vance mentions housing specifically, even though we know that Trump recently got in the way of that bipartisan legislation to make housing more affordable because he wanted to prioritize the Save America Act. Luckily, the legislation was able to go through even without his signature, but still it's something that Trump actively got in the way of. And Vance says that what Trump is doing with these different policy ideas, it's all different from past presidents, and the implication, of course, is that different equals good. Well, different doesn't always equal good, especially when the different policies Trump is doing are making it so that all of these things are actually worse, that things are more expensive. Remember, people are dealing with cost of living issues, rent issues, groceries, gas, everything is too expensive. What is Trump's idea? What has he done in his last 2 years back as president? Well, he's decided to impose a bunch of tariffs, which have made everything more expensive. And he's decided to launch this war in Iran, which has also made everything more expensive. So yes, these are different ideas, but they're not pushing us in the right direction. And then JD Vance gets into this topic about how we have to, as Republicans, they have to present this robust idea of capitalism as an alternative to socialism, and that's the best way forward. Well, I do agree in part that historically the way that governments have been able to fend off socialism is by reviving capitalism, changing it in some form. It usually seems like they've done it in the direction of social democracy, right? Like with FDR's New Deal programs. Usually the way to combat a rising sentiment that we need socialism is to have something that looks more like social democracy, and that's actually something that socialists themselves criticize. So the fact that JD Vance is essentially saying, yeah, we need to revamp capitalism, but not in a way that pushes it in a leftward direction, in a way that pushes it instead in a rightward direction, even though that hasn't been working for the past many decades. It's going to be a tough sell, but that's what he's going to try to do when he inevitably runs for president in 2028. Here is a little bit more of JD Vance during this interview talking about fraud that was rampant in government before he and Donald Trump took office.
There's all the Medicaid fraud, there's the food stamps fraud, there's the Small Business Administration fraud, there's this gender transition fraud. The unfortunate reality, Will, is that fraud in Washington, D.C. was as common as bad weather, and bad weather is very common in Washington. So we got a problem here. We're fixing that problem, but it's going to take us a long time to root out all this fraud because there was so much allowed to fester during the Biden administration and really beyond that.
Yeah, so this all rings pretty hollow when JD Vance, his boss, Donald Trump, is the one that is supposed to be in charge of finding all of this fraud. Remember Donald Trump, who had to pay that $25 million settlement over deceptive practices at Trump University, or the Donald Trump who had to pay $2 million in damages for taking personal money from a charitable group in the Trump Foundation? What about the Donald Trump who had 34 criminal federal convictions for falsifying business records in connection to a hush money scheme? Then there's also the stuff that he's done just since taking office again. There's the $1.4 billion that he's made in crypto from World Liberty Financial. There's Trump Coin and Melania Coin. And beyond that, there's the reflecting pool and the ballroom. Must I go on? There's all these things that we hear about day in and day out. So Donald Trump is the person to take a look at if you want to root out fraud in this country. But instead of him being in charge of finding it, he needs to be the one that is taken out, because he is the number one perpetrator of fraud in this country. And if that's the best that JD Vance has to offer ahead of 2028, I'm just not sure it's going to be enough, especially if you have a few other Republicans who are maybe a little bit more talented entering the field. But this is what JD Vance has to offer us right now.
Thanks for watching. Check out this other video. And if you like our content, make sure to subscribe so YouTube puts our videos in your feed, and subscribe to the podcast on Spotify and Apple.